think if proposition's so keen on surrendering, then maybe they should surrender this debate for two reasons. One, the literal fact that two of my speakers' speeches existed and they just blue tick them like they mean nothing to you. And two, the fact that they ignore 70 of my POIs and then accept good news. Like, what racism is that? Can we just please get to the very basic idea that there has been zero case progression from their side, while our side has not only talked about valid choice, meaning coercion existing on their side, I'll bring that up later, and two, how identity is a very real thing that we should discuss. Because a life isn't worth living if it's not being used in the first place. That's why people commit suicide. It's because they don't see their lives amounting to anything. It's why they do it, because they don't see their lives having some sort of value. Because when people outside hate them for being Ukrainian and they tell them, listen, you have zero value in society, they think back to themselves and, hey, when I was in Ukraine, at least I was fighting for something that I believed in, and my identity was attached to that. You don't get that on their sides. 9 context clashes in this debate. 1, the fact that they say that there's accountability for Russia. Where are you going to find accountability to Russia taking over Ukraine and then suddenly, hey, stop taking over countries? Where? If anything, we have accountability on our side by the very fact that we're resisting against them taking over Europe. 2, the second context clash, this idea about surrendering. We've told you numerous times that surrendering means giving up completely. The only response to the decline, the only response we get to this is nuh-uh. But even if this is the only response they give and somehow surrendering means not giving up completely, I think the very fact that giving up means coming to negotiations, which they do talk about, means that Russia gets to use their power that they have to say, listen, I'm going to force you to sign this negotiation, otherwise why? The very fact that you don't want to continue fighting, I'm going to use that as a mechanism to say, if you don't sign this certain part of the negotiation, I'm going to continue waging war on you. I think that's fair enough to say and to assume that surrendering means giving up absolutely everything in that case. Thirdly, they talk about 2 outcomes of war, stalemate and escalation. This is just not true. You know what's the other outcome of war? The one who wins. That means complete control. They even acknowledge this in their context. The 4th context clash we then have is Ukraine fighting for what they believe in the first place. It's not fighting because they believe they would win. Of course, no one thought Ukraine was going to last this long. Russia is a massive country. They fought because they believed in their own country in its entirety. It's the reason they separated from the USSR in the first place. It's why right to self-determination exists. The 5th thing is about this like World War III. If we fight, World War III is going to happen? No. It's more likely that World War III is going to happen if we surrender, because of the Appeasement Act that happened. Hitler literally took over many countries in Europe because Britain was like, you can take over this one, just not one more. And then they took over another country. And then it just kept on happening until Britain had to intervene and literally declare war on them. Notice comparatively here, more lives are lost on their side. And when we literally just like continue fighting and possibly see an end of the war, comparatively we better for that lives lost. Talking about this lives saved, I think it's very like naughty of them to come up here and say that lives are inherently going to be lost, when we tell you that majority of the war is not necessarily based on gun-to-gun combat, but it's based on things like hacking. It's disabling how the country functions. We don't think everything is going to be like me, kill you, ba ba ba. We're not thinking that's a real outcome of the... Sit down. But 2, even if we do surrender, does that mean all the people that fought for the war means they die in vain? Please address this. Oh wait, sorry, there's no more speakers. I'll get to that. And then lastly, this idea about even if there's more lives lost, you're still not going to be able to live your lives to the fullest. And notice just lastly about this, like Russia has similar culture to Ukraine. Nah. The reason Russia attacked Ukraine was because they believed that Ukraine has a similar culture to Russia. They don't have similar cultures. There's a different language for a reason. Declined. There's very different nuanced reasons, and we think the very ignorant fact that you therefore assume that they have similar cultures means the value that you place on identity is null. We think this in an utmost like entirety loses then the debate from the forefront. I don't need to explain who won context. I think that's fairly intuitive. 2 issues, 1 legitimacy, practical benefits. Before I go on, yes?
What is the value then that you place on Ukrainian people's lives?
The value we place on Ukrainian people's lives is them believing and fighting for their life. It literally means I'm going to go to war, even if that means I possibly risk my life for the betterment of my children. Also, panel, just a quick side note here. Don't believe them when they come up here and they say, oh, Russia taking control means that there's going to be absolutely no more killing. We think Sharpeville massacre was a retaliation because people weren't happy that their identity was being opposed on, and in act of retaliation from the government, they literally killed people. We think the Russian government having Russia state-controlled TV and silencing many whistleblowers is evidence enough that they're willing to go to any length to protect their own ideals. This means the length of killing Ukrainians that say, listen, I don't necessarily agree, decline. I don't necessarily agree with what you're doing here. They talk about legitimacy. They tell you 3 things. 1, about peace. 2, about average person. And 3, globally. Not only is just this the wrong criteria, because 1, they don't include morals as a factor when deciding what peace is. 2, they have a mischaracterization of peace because they don't consider the intention of peace, which is fighting for what you believe in. And 3, even if we just consider that their criteria is like the Holy Grail and it should just remain, they don't weigh up choice to our criteria from the first place. They just blue tick my criteria speaker, or my speaker's criteria. Dealing with peace, we have 3 responses. 1, the fact that people worry about being shamed. We think that's enough to disrupt peace and cause retaliation, like I've said. 2, this idea about Sharpeville massacre, which I have addressed. And 3, we say even if like you achieve peace on your side, the very fact that you continue to fighting the war means you're trying to achieve peace in the first place. Comparatively, we're better for 2 reasons. 1, they have no pragmatic reason to actually implement the surrendering policy because of the fact that they won't achieve peace. But 2, just because we're fighting means that we're going to have peace on our side. Then this idea about like Russia economically being bad, no thank you. Let me just see what I wrote here. Okay, they talk about the benefits globally, about like economic benefits and stuff like that. 3 responses. Not only notice it's like an assertion at most, there's 0 analysis how it's going to benefit globally. But notice sanctions will still exist regardless. How? Because you're going to keep Russia in check. They don't gain benefits from that. 2, you're not going to financially benefit other countries besides for Russia, which is a big no-no. And 3, even if you're like getting some magic money from like God himself, you're not going to get economic benefits for Ukraine. Because why? The economy is literally going down. I don't think that they've come up here with the right intentions, because from my side of the bench, it has very well come across that they're more supportive of Russia than of Ukraine. We tell you very simply, we don't agree with the statement or fact. Going on to the second thing about coercion and stuff like that. Panel, this is not new information. My first speaker from the utmost thing is like, okay, cool. In order not to destabilize Eastern Europe and other countries forcing Ukraine to surrender, that's a factor of coercion. It means Ukraine willing to do something for the benefit of others. He literally said this, it got blue tick. What is the impact of this? We think the impact of this is that it completely invalidates the choice of them surrendering in the first place. We also think that the pressure that they're under right now is going to make them choose the wrong thing in the wrong time as well. And then lastly, just to deal with some small minority issues. The reason I say minority is because there's absolutely 0 engagement from their side. 3 things: identity, sovereignty, and economy. My speaker literally came up and said the moment you forfeit your sovereignty is the moment every decision you make becomes invalid. Please don't make them win this debate, because if you live in that world, every decision you make to fight for what you believe in becomes invalid because you're no longer worth. Thank you.